I was standing on the edge of the world I once knew, and in my hand was a letter that would shatter everything I had worked for. The sun hung lazily in the sky as I stood on the lawn outside the university, the day too perfect to be real. The cherry blossoms swirled in the breeze, their petals drifting like confetti in the air, signaling the end of one chapter. I had done it. 4 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights were finally behind me, and I was holding my diploma, the symbol of everything I'd worked for. The scent of my mother's cooking wafted from the house, mingling with the fresh air, pulling me back to the world I had always known. She'd promised to make my favorite dish, a comforting reminder of home, and it felt like nothing could ruin this moment. The pride in my chest, the weight of my academic achievement, felt so heavy, yet so fulfilling. But then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a subtle disruption in the perfection of the day. I pulled it out and saw the name on the screen, an invitation to dinner from an old acquaintance, someone who had always been polite but distant. It seemed harmless enough. I thought about declining, but there was something about the moment, something about the way everything was slipping into place so easily that made me say yes. I had no idea that one dinner would unravel everything I thought I knew about myself and my future. As a child, I was always surrounded by the hum of medical talk, my father's steady voice, the quiet murmur of my mother, and the proud clatter of family gatherings. My family had built an empire in medicine, each generation contributing to the legacy that stretched back decades. For as long as I could remember, there was one thing they expected of me: to continue that legacy. I had always known that. It was never a question of if, but when. Every dinner conversation seemed to circle back to it. My father's voice would rise with that familiar, rehearsed passion, explaining how the world needed doctors, how the noblest profession was in healing others, how there was no greater honor than saving lives. His lectures were as regular as the seasons, each one more urgent than the last, reminding me that the family's expectations weren't just expectations, they were a duty, a calling. There was no room for deviation, no allowance for dreams of anything outside the world of medicine. But what they didn't understand was that my heart had quietly shifted. It wasn't the sterile world of white coats and stethoscopes that called to me, it was the dynamic field of business and healthcare management. I was fascinated by the idea of shaping healthcare from the inside, finding solutions to improve systems and operations, not just patient care. It was a passion that burned quietly yet fiercely in me, one I could never quite bring myself to fully voice to my parents. Still, every time I brought it up, my father would shift the conversation, as if my dreams were nothing more than a passing distraction. My mother, always more understanding, would give me a soft smile and tell me, "It's just a phase." They dismissed the awards I had earned in business competitions, the internships that set me apart from my peers, as if they were mere diversions compared to the medical accomplishments of my cousin, who had become a renowned surgeon. He was the shining example of what it meant to carry the family's name forward. He was the one they held up as the gold standard. I could see it in their eyes, how their praise for him felt heavier than any compliment they had ever given me. And each time, a knot would tighten in my chest. I had always been a dutiful daughter, a good student, but their disregard for my achievements in business made me question everything. I couldn't help but wonder, was it worth it? Was it worth chasing my own path if it meant abandoning their dreams for me? And if I chose my own dreams, would I ever truly be able to live up to the family's expectations, or would I always feel the weight of their disappointment? The tension between honoring their legacy and forging my own path was a constant battle, and it was beginning to wear on me. But how could I stay true to myself when everything I had been taught told me to follow a road already paved? The choice felt impossible. I arrived at the family home, my graduation gown still hanging loosely on my shoulders, a bittersweet reminder of everything I had just achieved. I had expected celebration, laughter, the clink of glasses filled with champagne. But as I walked through the door, the air felt thick with something else, something heavier than any party atmosphere could ever bring. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The warm aroma of my mother's cooking seemed distant, swallowed by the oppressive silence that had settled over the dinner table. My parents were already seated, their faces unreadable. The table, set with the finest china, felt like a stage, and I knew, instinctively, that this dinner would not be the celebration I had imagined. I took my seat, and for a moment, we all sat in silence. The clinking of silverware was the only sound breaking the stillness, each small noise echoing like a drumbeat in the tense room. My mother glanced at my father, her eyes filled with that familiar concern. He didn't meet her gaze. Instead, he picked up his fork, poking at the food without really eating. The tension was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Then, without warning, my father set his utensils down with a sharp clink and turned to me. His voice was calm, too calm, as if he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "You've had your time to celebrate," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "But now it's time for you to make a decision." I felt the blood drain from my face. I already knew what was coming. "What decision?" I asked, though I could hardly find my voice. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but my father was resolute. "You're taking the MCAT," he stated flatly. "We've arranged everything. It's your final opportunity to follow the family legacy. Medicine is your path, and this is your chance to prove it." The words hung in the air, suffocating me. My heart raced as I fought to keep my composure. Taking the MCAT wasn't just a suggestion, it was an ultimatum. I stared at my plate, the food before me a blur, my hands suddenly clammy. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. But there was no mistaking the conviction in my tone. I raised my head and looked my father directly in the eyes. "I've already made my decision." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents both froze, as if they hadn't expected me to refuse. My father's expression darkened, his jaw clenched in that way I knew all too well when he was on the brink of losing control. "I've secured a job," I continued, my voice steady now, though my heart hammered in my chest. "A position with a prestigious consulting firm. It's what I've always wanted. I'm not going to medical school." The fury that erupted from my father was like a volcano, long dormant and finally unleashed. His chair scraped violently against the floor as he stood, his face twisted with disbelief. "A consulting firm?" His voice rose, sharp and bitter. "You would throw away everything we've worked for, everything this family has built for that? Do you really think that's a worthy path? That's foolish, reckless." I felt the sting of his words like a slap. His anger wasn't just about the job, it was about what it represented. It was about the rejection of the future he had mapped out for me, the future that had been laid down for generations. "You've let yourself be distracted by these foolish dreams," he spat, his words like venom. "This is what you want? To chase some ridiculous fantasy instead of taking the opportunity to make a real difference in the world? Your cousin is saving lives, and you're playing at business. I am disappointed in you." His words cut deep. I had never seen him this angry before, and the weight of his disappointment felt like a crushing blow. It wasn't just about my choice, it was about everything I had. failed to live up to, in his eyes, all the years of trying to prove myself, all the times I had held back my true desires to please him, had led to this moment, and now it seemed nothing I did would ever be enough. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words caught in my throat. What was there left to say? There was no convincing him. In that moment, I knew something had irrevocably changed between us. The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. My father stood there, his towering figure casting a shadow over the table, his eyes blazing with an anger I had never seen before. "If you refuse to take the MCAT," he said, his voice cold, "you're no longer welcome in this house. You have two choices: medical school, or you leave." I could feel the world around me blur, the edges of the room closing in like the walls of a trap. His ultimatum was final. There was no room for negotiation, no space for my own dreams to breathe. I glanced at my mother, desperate for some sign of support, some softening in her expression. But she sat there, her face a mask of silent resignation. Her eyes avoided mine, looking instead at the hands folded tightly in her lap. She said nothing, as if this had already been decided long before I walked through the door. In that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just about the MCAT. This wasn't even about medicine anymore. It was about control. My father wanted me to be his version of who I was supposed to be, his perfect image of success. And my mother? She had already chosen to side with him without a word of protest. I felt a cold rage bubble up inside me, but there was no doubt in my mind. I wouldn't bend. I wouldn't let their vision of my future define me. My heart raced as disbelief and anger mingled into a force I couldn't contain. "No," I said, my voice steady but forceful. "I won't go to medical school. I've made my decision. I'm not going to let you decide my life for me." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. My father's face twisted in pure fury, but there was a dangerous calmness to it now, like the calm before the storm. And then, in one swift motion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He dropped it onto the table in front of me, as if it were some sort of ransom or payment for my silence. "Here," he said coldly, "this is all you'll need to get by. You wanted to leave? Fine. Take this and get out of my house." The sheer condescension of it hit me like a slap. He wasn't just asking me to leave. He was trying to strip me of my dignity, reducing my worth to a single bill. My pulse hammered in my ears as my hands clenched into fists, but I didn't move. I didn't let him see how much it hurt. I glanced at my diploma, still tucked under my arm, the symbol of everything I had accomplished on my own terms. The weight of it felt heavier now, but in that weight I found my strength. Without a word, I stood up, grabbed my diploma, and walked to the door. My father didn't try to stop me. He didn't even look at me anymore. He had won in his mind, and I was already gone, no longer worth his attention. As I reached for the door, I turned back, my voice low but unwavering. $127, that's my starting capital. One day, you will regret this. And with that, I stepped out into the night, leaving behind the life I had known, the family who had never truly seen me for who I was, and a future that was no longer dictated by their expectations. It was just the beginning. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time, I stood outside the life I had known. The cold air hit my face, sharp and unfamiliar, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. With $127 in my pocket and nothing else, I felt the weight of it all, a weight that wasn't just financial, but emotional, too. I had left everything behind, my family, my home, my father's dreams for me, the life I had been molded for since birth. And yet, there was a strange sense of freedom that pulsed beneath the sting of it all. It was terrifying, but exhilarating too. I had made a choice, and now it was time to build something entirely my own. No more walking in the shadow of my father's legacy. No more being confined to the narrow path he had carved out for me. This was my chance to prove to myself and to the world that I was capable of so much more than the small box they had kept me in. I rented the cheapest motel room I could find. The faded neon lights outside flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows on the cracked sidewalk. The room smelled faintly of mildew, and the bed was lumpy and uncomfortable, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was my goal. I sat on the edge of the bed, the crumpled dollar bills in my hand, feeling like the last remnants of a life I had been forced to leave behind. But I wasn't afraid. I had never been more determined. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through business articles and healthcare reports, a quiet fire igniting within me as I read. My mind buzzed with ideas. How to merge business acumen with healthcare management in ways no one had thought of before. How to improve the system, make it more efficient, more accessible, more sustainable. But that wasn't enough. I didn't just want success. I wanted revenge. I could feel the simmering anger in my chest, a deep-rooted resentment that had only grown since the night I walked out of my family's home. My father had dismissed me, crushed my dreams, and pushed me into a corner, convinced that the only way forward was through medicine. Now, it was time to show him how wrong he was. I wasn't going to play by his rules. I wasn't going to follow the path of his hospital system. I was going to disrupt it. I would build something bigger, something more impactful, something that would challenge the very foundations of the healthcare industry. And when I did, I would make him see. I would make him regret every word, every decision that had led me to this moment. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk. No more waiting for approval, no more living in the shadow of a legacy I had no part in building. I would carve my own path, and I would do it on my terms. With only $127 in my pocket, I was starting from scratch. But in my heart, I knew I would build something that would outlast all of it. Something that would make them all take notice. This was just the beginning. The world would soon see what I could do. Opening the business account at the small, local bank felt like the first official step into the world I was about to create. The fluorescent lights flickered above me as I sat across from the teller, a stack of papers in front of me. I had never imagined this moment. But now, as I signed my name on the dotted line, I felt the weight of it, the gravity of what I was about to do. With only $127 left in my pocket, I knew I was starting from nothing, but something inside me clicked. The idea came to me in an instant. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. It was a symbol of everything I had risen from, the ashes of my family's rejection, the fiery determination that had sparked inside me the moment I walked out the door. It wasn't just a name. It was my story. It was my future. As I left the bank, the weight of the name felt empowering, like I was carrying something monumental on my shoulders. But I knew the hard work was just beginning. The early days were grueling. I rented a cheap desk in a shared office space, staring at the blank walls, the coldness of the room only amplifying the quiet loneliness that came with being on my own. I spent countless hours on my laptop, researching, reading reports, identifying inefficiencies in the healthcare system, crafting proposals. I was offering my services to small practices, doctors, dentists, therapists. anyone who might be willing to listen. But the rejections came fast and often, each one a cold reminder that I was a newcomer, unproven, with nothing more than a name and a dream. I worked day and night, my body fueled only by coffee and the fire inside me to prove everyone wrong. It wasn't easy. I had no big investors, no network of supporters, just the conviction that I could change the system from within. But progress was slow, and doubt began to creep in. Was I truly making a difference, or was I just another idealistic dreamer chasing an impossible vision? Then, one morning, it all changed. I was at a local coffee shop, sitting at a corner table with my laptop open, trying to perfect a pitch for a new client. The low hum of conversations surrounded me, the smell of espresso thick in the air. I overheard two doctors sitting at the table next to mine. Their conversation was mundane at first, talking about office hours, scheduling, but then one of them mentioned something that caught my attention. "We're losing patients because our scheduling system is a mess," the older doctor said with a sigh. "It's costing us so much time and money to fix it, and we can't seem to get it right." I couldn't help but lean in, my mind already working through possible solutions. I'd spent the last few months studying healthcare systems, looking for inefficiencies. This was my chance. I stood up and walked over, introducing myself as someone who might be able to help. I wasn't sure they would listen, but I wasn't going to let the opportunity slip by. At first, they were skeptical. I could see it in their eyes. They were used to the standard consultants who came in with expensive proposals and empty promises. But I had something they didn't expect: practical solutions and a genuine understanding of their struggles. I listened carefully, asking questions, taking notes, and then, when the moment felt right, I pitched a streamlined system for patient scheduling, reducing wait times and increasing efficiency without requiring a massive upfront investment. To my surprise, they agreed to give me a shot. Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly with their office. I implemented the new scheduling system, reorganized their workflow, and helped them optimize their billing process. The changes were immediate. Patients were seen on time, appointments ran smoothly, and the office staff was less stressed. But the real impact was in their bottom line. Within 3 months, their revenue increased by 30%. The doctors were stunned. They hadn't expected such a dramatic turnaround from a small consulting firm with nothing more than a name. They praised my work, but what mattered most was the word of mouth that followed. Word spread quickly among small practices, and soon I found myself with more clients than I could handle. I was building something bigger than I had imagined. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions wasn't just about making money, it was about making a real impact. I wasn't just fixing broken systems, I was proving that my vision for healthcare management could disrupt the industry. But even as success began to take shape, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, and there were bigger challenges waiting for me. But I had already shown myself, and the world, that I could rise from the ashes. And no one would be able to stop me from building something bigger than my father's hospital. This was only the beginning. The momentum was unstoppable. What had started as a small consulting firm in a dingy office space was now growing at an exponential rate. Word of Phoenix Healthcare Solutions spread like wildfire across the healthcare community. Practices, large and small, were calling me, eager to find a way to optimize their operations and boost their profits. What they didn't realize was that they weren't just getting a consultant, they were getting a partner, someone who understood the inner workings of the system, who could make real change happen. But with success came pressure. The early days of my business had been a blur of long hours, sleepless nights, and constant hustling to meet deadlines. But now, with multiple clients on board, the stakes were higher than ever. Every new project felt like walking a tightrope. There was no margin for error. I couldn't afford to fail. I juggled my day job and the growth of Phoenix Healthcare Solutions with determination. During the day, I worked as a healthcare consultant, traveling across the country to meet with potential clients. While at night, I stayed up late, developing new strategies, managing contracts, and hiring the best talent to help scale the business. I knew I needed to surround myself with the best people, those who shared my vision of transforming the healthcare landscape. Slowly but surely, I built a team of brilliant consultants, each an expert in their field. Together, we worked tirelessly, fine-tuning systems and procedures for small practices, helping them achieve levels of efficiency and profitability they had never dreamed of before. But the risks kept growing. I pushed myself harder with each new client, each new acquisition, taking chances that many thought were too bold. I had no choice. If I was going to build something that could stand the test of time, something that would challenge the very system my father had spent his life cultivating, I had to be willing to take risks that no one else would dare. And those risks began to pay off. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions transformed into something bigger. My company wasn't just a consulting firm anymore, it was a powerhouse, offering cutting-edge solutions to the most pressing problems in the healthcare system. We were reshaping the industry, one practice at a time. But I didn't stop there. A year into the business, I realized I wasn't just content with consulting. I had a bigger vision, one that would allow me to disrupt the entire healthcare system. With the backing of investors and the experience I had gained over the past year, Phoenix Healthcare Solutions morphed into Phoenix Medical Group. We began acquiring hospitals across the country, each one a stepping stone toward the dream I had been building. It was a risky move, but it paid off. Phoenix Medical Group grew into a network of hospitals and clinics that spanned several states. I was no longer just a consultant, I was an industry leader, a force to be reckoned with. But the price of success had been high. The late nights, the sacrifices, the stress. Every decision felt like it carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. As I stood in the boardroom of our newly acquired hospital, staring out at the skyline of the city below, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From the day I had walked out of my parents' house with nothing but $127 in my pocket, to this moment, standing at the helm of a multi-million-dollar healthcare empire. I had done it. But even as I looked at the impressive network I had built, there was still an ache in my chest. A reminder of the family I had left behind. A year had passed, but the grudge I held against my father had only grown stronger. Every time I saw another hospital branded with the Phoenix logo, I couldn't shake the thought of him sitting in his sterile office, dismissing my dreams. The weight of his rejection still lingered, a constant reminder of the path I had chosen. One day, I thought, one day I would stand before him again. And when I did, he would see what I had built, and he would regret every word he had ever spoken. But for now, I allowed myself to savor the victory. The company was thriving, my vision was becoming a reality, and the future was mine to shape. The rise of Phoenix Medical Group was only the beginning. I couldn't avoid it, even if I tried. The news about Kim Family Medical Center was everywhere, on the local news, in the papers, and even in whispers at healthcare conferences. My father's legacy, the crown jewel of the Kim family, was slowly falling apart. At first, it was subtle, a dip in revenue that no one talked about openly. Then, it became undeniable. Patient satisfaction scores plummeted. The hospital was no longer the high standard it once was. The systems, once cutting edge, had become outdated and inefficient. Staff were overworked and morale was low. It was clear that the management was struggling to keep things afloat, and my father's old ways of running the hospital no longer seemed to be working. I watched with a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. It was hard to admit, but it was true. I felt a sting of something like revenge, but it wasn't just about my father's failure. It was about everything I had fought for, everything I had built with my own hands. They had rejected me, they had forced me out, and now the very institution that had once seemed untouchable was crumbling before my eyes. It wasn't that I didn't care about the patients. I did. But there was something deeper at play here. I had spent years building Phoenix Medical Group, using my skills, my passion, my expertise to make healthcare better. I knew exactly what was wrong with Kim Family Medical Center. The outdated systems, the inefficient processes, the lack of innovation, they were all problems I could fix in my sleep. I could turn that place around, make it something great again. I could save it. But the family rejection still stung. My father's last words to me, how my dreams were foolish, how I was wasting my potential, echoed in my mind. They had pushed me out. They had made it clear that I wasn't good enough. They had chosen their legacy over me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to forgive that. Still, there was a cold, calculated part of me that knew exactly what to do. I had been preparing for this moment for years. Every acquisition, every step I took with Phoenix Medical Group had been part of a long-term plan. A plan that, deep down, I had known would eventually lead me back to the Kim family's doorstep. I had learned everything I could about their financial troubles, their management issues, and the growing discontent among their staff. I'd kept my ear to the ground, patiently waiting for the inevitable collapse. And now, it was happening. The writing was on the wall. Kim Family Medical Center was on the brink of failure, and when it did, I would be ready. I could already see the pieces falling into place. Phoenix Medical Group had grown stronger with each passing day, each new acquisition. My company had the resources, the expertise, and the network to step in and take control. The question wasn't if the hospital would fail, it was when. And when that day came, I would be there, ready to take what was mine. The thought of owning Kim Family Medical Center, of taking control of the institution my father had built, sent a thrill of anticipation through me. It wasn't just about power, it was about redemption. It was about proving to my parents that they had made a terrible mistake, that I had been right all along, that the future of healthcare wasn't built on outdated practices, but on innovation, efficiency, and vision. But as I watched the downward spiral of the hospital unfold, I couldn't help but feel a moment of uncertainty. This wasn't just business, it was personal. The stakes were higher now, and I knew, deep down, that taking over Kim Family Medical Center wasn't just a move to expand my empire. It was the final chapter in a long, bitter story of family rejection and ambition. I took a deep breath, pushing aside the emotions, and focused on the cold, hard facts. The time would come soon. Kim Family Medical Center would fail. And when it did, Phoenix Medical Group would rise from the ashes, just as I had. One day I would stand at the helm of that hospital, not just as a businesswoman, but as the person who had outlasted every expectation, every barrier, and every rejection. And my father would have no choice but to recognize it. It was only a matter of time. The call came late on a Friday night. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, its glow lighting up the dark room like a warning. I picked it up without thinking, already bracing myself for the news. I had been waiting for it, after all, but even so, hearing it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. Kim Family Medical Center files for bankruptcy protection. For a moment, I couldn't move. The words didn't fully register in my mind. The Kim family's flagship hospital, the one my father had poured his life into, was on the brink of collapse. There was no way around it now. The hospital was in a full-blown crisis, unable to pay its debts, facing staff layoffs, and unable to meet the growing demands of its patients. And the only option left was to find a buyer. It was everything I had known would happen. The moment I had been preparing for, the moment when Kim Family Medical Center would fail, and the door to its future would swing wide open for someone to walk through. I had expected it, but now that it was here, the weight of the decision hit me like a freight train. I stood at the window of my office, staring out at the city lights below, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the pull of the moment, the choice that lay before me. I could take control. I could buy the hospital, step in and save it, and use it as a launch pad to grow Phoenix Medical Group even further. It would be the perfect addition to my network, the ultimate prize. I could finally prove to my parents that I was right, that I had built something better, that the future of healthcare wasn't theirs. It was mine. But then there was the other side of the coin, the side that told me to walk away, to let someone else take the reins. Someone who didn't have the emotional weight tied to the hospital, someone who could see it as a business decision without the bitterness of family history clouding their judgment. It was tempting to think about moving on, to let the hospital fall into the hands of someone else who might be better suited to manage it without the personal baggage I carried. I paced around the room, hands shaking slightly as I ran through the options in my mind. It was risky. If I took over the hospital, it would be a public spectacle, a power move that would put me directly in conflict with my parents. It could ruin what little relationship we had left, but it was also the opportunity I had been waiting for. The chance to prove, once and for all, that my way was the right way, that I could build something far beyond the limitations of their outdated legacy. The phone rang again, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a representative from the bankruptcy court. They needed a buyer, and fast. I could almost hear the desperation in their voice. The window was closing, they said. If no one steps in soon, the hospital will be forced to close its doors permanently. My mind raced. I had the resources, I had the team, I had the experience. Phoenix Medical Group was strong enough to handle this, to breathe new life into Kim Family Medical Center and turn it around. But was I really willing to walk back into that place? Was I ready to face my parents after everything that had happened? After all the years of rejection and disappointment, was I prepared to take control of their legacy, not out of charity, but out of ambition? I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, torn between the desire for control and the pull of my own pride. The decision was a delicate one, fraught with complications. I knew I could make the hospital successful again, but I also knew it would be a ruthless game. The question wasn't about whether I had the ability, it was whether I had the resolve to confront my past head on. Without another thought, I made my decision. My fingers moved quickly over the phone, dialing the number for the bankruptcy court. "I'm in," I said simply. "I'll take it." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but they were exactly what I needed to say. I wasn't here to save my parents' hospital out of some sense of duty. I wasn't here to fix what had been broken. I was here to take control of their legacy, to prove that I could do it better, that the way I ran things, the way I had built Phoenix Medical Group, was the way forward. It wasn't about rescuing a family institution. It was about claiming what was rightfully mine. And when I returned, it wouldn't be to save them. It would be to take over everything they had spent their lives building. I wasn't going back to heal old wounds. I was going back to break them open and show them the truth. I was going back to take what they had tried to deny me. The boardroom was silent as I stepped through the door, the weight of the moment pressing down on me with every step. I had imagined this scene 1,000 times in my mind, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality. The room was sterile and imposing. The long, polished table stretching out before me, filled with the same board members who had been a part of Kim Family Medical Center for years. But what really caught my eye were my parents, sitting at the head of the table, their faces a mixture of disbelief and confusion. They hadn't expected me to walk in here today. They hadn't expected me to be the one to save them. But now, there I was, standing at the precipice of everything they had worked so hard to build, holding the future of their hospital in my hands. The shock on their faces was immediate. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as they flicked from me to the board members and back again. My mother, ever the composed one, was trying to mask her surprise, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. They both knew exactly who I was, but they hadn't known that the CEO of Phoenix Medical Group, the billionaire who had turned countless hospitals around, was their daughter. I had spent years building an empire from nothing, taking risks, pushing limits, and proving myself at every turn. And now, here I was, back at the heart of their legacy, holding the keys to the very thing they had poured their lives into. I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence hang in the air, letting the weight of the moment sink in. My father was the first to speak, his voice low, filled with skepticism. "You think you can save this place?" he asked, his words clipped. "You think you know more about running a hospital than I do?" I didn't flinch. I was ready for this. "I know what works," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "I know how to fix what's broken. I've been doing it for years, building a healthcare system that actually works, one that's efficient, innovative, and forward-thinking. This hospital, your hospital, is stuck in the past, and that's why it's failing." His eyes flashed with anger, but I pressed on, turning to the board members and presenting the plan I had carefully crafted over the past weeks. The plan wasn't just about saving the hospital, it was about transforming it, integrating cutting-edge technology, improving patient care, streamlining operations, and most importantly, putting the patients first. I laid out every detail, every strategy I had perfected at Phoenix Medical Group. I wasn't just here to step in as the savior. I was here to take control, to guide this place into a new era. I could see the doubt in my father's eyes beginning to waver as I spoke. The resistance in him was still there, but I was confident that he knew I was right. The truth was undeniable. I had the expertise. I had the resources. And most importantly, I had the vision to turn Kim Family Medical Center into something greater than it had ever been. "You've spent your life building this," I continued, looking directly at him. "But what you've built is outdated. It's no longer what patients need. It's no longer what healthcare needs. And if you don't act now, it's going to fail." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as my words settled in. My father's expression darkened, his pride still fighting against the reality before him. But I knew the truth had hit home. He had no choice but to face it. And then the moment of truth arrived. I turned to the board members, my hand poised above the contract that would transfer control of the hospital to Phoenix Medical Group. The deal was about to be sealed. I could feel the weight of the pen in my hand, the finality of the decision looming before me. "I'm not here to destroy what you've built," I said quietly, my voice low but filled with conviction. "I'm here to take it to the next level, to build something even better, to improve the healthcare system that you've worked so hard to preserve." This is what I meant when I said I would improve healthcare systems. The words hung in the air, a challenge, a promise, and a declaration all at once. I looked at my father one last time. His face was unreadable now, a mixture of disbelief and resignation. The fight was gone from him. He knew that I was the future, and with that, I signed the contract. The ink dried on the page, and in that instant, everything changed. Kim Family Medical Center was no longer his, it was mine. I had taken control of their legacy. I had proven that I was the one who could truly save it, not because I wanted to save them, but because I had built something far greater, something that would change the future of healthcare for good. As I stood there, the reality of it settled in. The war had been fought, and the victor was clear. I had taken what was rightfully mine, and this was only the beginning. The first few months after taking over Kim Family Medical Center were a whirlwind of transformation. Under my leadership, the hospital, which had been on the verge of collapse, began to thrive. The once crumbling systems were overhauled with cutting-edge technology. Patient satisfaction soared. The revenue streams, which had been in freefall, stabilized and then grew. The staff, once disillusioned and burned out, found new purpose, new energy, and a renewed sense of pride in their work. I stood in the boardroom, reviewing the numbers, the growth, the undeniable success we had achieved. Everything I had set out to accomplish was coming to fruition. Kim Family Medical Center was no longer a shadow of what it once was. It was now a beacon of efficiency, innovation, and patient-centered care. Phoenix Medical Group had done what it had always promised to do: revolutionize healthcare. And yet, as I looked out of the glass windows of the executive suite, overlooking the city that had once felt so foreign to me, the victory felt strangely hollow. I had everything I had ever wanted. I had proven to the world that I was capable. I had built an empire, I had taken my family's legacy, and I had made it better. Phoenix Medical Group was now one of the most powerful healthcare organizations in the country. My name was known. My success was undeniable. And Kim Family Medical Center, once on the brink of disaster, was now a symbol of my triumph. But what had it cost me? I hadn't just taken over a hospital, I had torn apart the last remnants of my family. The wounds I had suffered, the rejection I had faced, had led me here, to this very moment. I had climbed to the top, but in doing so, I had left behind the people who were supposed to be my foundation. My parents were still out there, somewhere, living their lives without me. My father, though proud of what I had achieved, would never admit it. My mother, ever silent, would never understand. The broken bonds between us felt heavier now, a constant weight on my chest. What good was success if it couldn't heal the rift between us? What did it matter if I had built the future, if it meant I had lost my family in the process? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the contracts and figures in front of me, but my mind was elsewhere. It was in the past, in the memories of a girl who had only ever wanted to prove herself, to prove that she was worth something, worth more than the narrow path her family had planned for her, worth more than the title of daughter or legacy. I had shown them all. I had succeeded where they had failed. But did it make a difference? Did it fill the emptiness that had always lingered inside me? I thought about the moments I had spent with my parents before all of this. The pride in their eyes when I graduated, the way they would have celebrated my achievements if they had only known how much I had to fight for them. But that was long gone. They didn't see me as the woman I had become. They only saw their failed expectations. And I had become a woman who was defined by what she had built, not by the love of the people who should have been there with her. The irony of it all struck me. I had done what I had set out to do, taken control, made my mark, but now I was left with a cold victory. Success, it seemed, couldn't replace the warmth of family. No amount of money, no number of hospitals, no accolades or recognition could fill that void. I closed the files in front of me, the weight of the decision settling in once again. I had fought hard, worked relentlessly, and I had won. But what was it worth when the very thing I had sacrificed, family, was still beyond my reach? As the day ended and the lights of the city blinked to life outside, I knew one thing for certain. I had achieved everything, but it wasn't enough. Because in the end, no matter how high you rise, no matter how much you succeed, success will always feel empty when you're standing alone at the top. And no matter how much I had built, I couldn't rebuild what I had lost. The first rays of the morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, casting a soft glow over the sleek, modern furniture, the polished surfaces of my desk, the endless rows of medical charts and files. The world outside had already begun to stir, cars rushing through the streets, people heading to work, life continuing on as it always did. But for me, the world felt different. I stood there, alone, looking out at the horizon, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of everything I had done, the price of it all. I had created something extraordinary. Phoenix Medical Group was revolutionizing healthcare. I had taken Kim Family Medical Center and turned it into a beacon of innovation. Hospitals across the country were following my model, and I was being hailed as a visionary, a pioneer. There were accolades, there was success, there was power. I had won, in every sense of the word. But standing there, in that quiet moment as the sun rose, I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. The cost of it all was more than I had ever anticipated. The price of my victory had been steep. I had built a legacy of my own, one that had eclipsed the family I had left behind, one that would be remembered long after I was gone. But that legacy came at a cost. I had given up everything to get here, the love of my parents, the shared moments of triumph and defeat that could have bonded us, the support that I had once longed for, the acceptance I had so desperately needed, all sacrificed in the name of ambition. Now I stood at the helm of a new era, a new empire, but in the quiet of the early morning I was left to face the truth. I controlled my future, but at what cost? The question lingered, echoing through the hollow spaces of my heart. Was it worth it? In the bright light of success, I had built something that no one could ever take away from me, but I had also lost the one thing that had once meant everything, the connection to the family I had come from. The bond that should have been my foundation had been shattered by my own hands, and no amount of success could ever fill that void. The quiet hum of my office surrounded me, the soft sounds of the city rising up in the background, but all I could hear was the unanswered question reverberating through my thoughts. I had built an empire, but I had also lost my place in the family that had given me life. And now, as I looked out over the world I had fought so hard to claim, I couldn't help but wonder, was it worth it? The sun rose higher in the sky, casting its light across the city, a reminder that time moved on, whether I was ready for it or not. I knew that I would keep pushing forward, that I would continue to build, to innovate, to prove myself. But in the quiet moments, when I allowed myself to feel the weight of my choices, the answer remained elusive, a lingering shadow in the back of my mind. I had created something extraordinary, but the price of that creation was a legacy lost forever. And as I stood there, watching the sunrise, I couldn't help but wonder, if I could go back, would I still choose this path? Would I still sacrifice everything for the success that now defined me? The answer, like the future, was still uncertain.